Welcome to my home. My name is Dr. Kristen. I'm really excited if you're here joining live today or if you're watching the recording. I'm really excited to talk to you about something that I love near and dear to my heart, which is milk. So I'm an animal scientist and I love science mainly because it's like storytelling. So it always starts with that problem or that first question. There's a lot of character development in the mix of it. There could be plot twists, there could be a climax to the story, there could be things that are being solved or things that they're learning from failure. But that's the kind of the gist of science, and what I love about it is that true storytelling. So today we're going to talk about milk, and hopefully you can see why an animal scientist would want to study milk. Not only does it provide healthy nutrition for us as people, but it's very much a part of our natural world. If you think about it, milk is the most natural and oldest fluid in our lives. We've been using milk for healthy nutrition for about 3,000 years. Really interesting study came out about 4 years ago. Archaeologists dug up some really old pieces of pottery and they actually found remnants of burnt cheese at the bottom of it. So clearly people have been trying to make cheese for a long time, and they dated that pottery to be about 3,000 years old. So I thought that was really cool and exciting. The other interesting thing about milk is that it's a really complex fluid. It naturally has sugars and proteins and fats and vitamins and minerals in it. And if you think about milk, usually people think about all the different things that you can make with milk. So cheese, butter, yogurt, cottage cheese, ice cream, and even cheese. There's 33,000 different types of cheese. And a lot of this is because milk is so complex. If you add different things to milk, you can get all these different really cool dairy products. So today I'm going to talk more about milk and do some hands-on activities, but I always really like to start with a game. So we're gonna play Guess the Animal game. All right, so I'm gonna show you different pictures. There's gonna be really, really close-up pictures. So if you're here live, you can put in the chat if you wanna guess, or you're watching the recording, you can say it out wherever you're at watching this video, okay? So this first animal, guess this animal. All right, so it looks a little fuzzy to me. Maybe that's like one clue of what it could be. That could be like an ear. Well, if you guessed a bear, you're pretty close. This is actually a grizzly bear cub. Now, bears are really fascinating animals. So one cool thing about bears and as a mammal and milk is that bears give birth and they lactate milk while they're hibernating, which is pretty interesting. And the other really cool thing is after about 150 days, after this little bear cub is born, the bear cub and his mom will emerge from their den. And the cool thing is that is when the milk from the bear, the grizzly bear mom, actually changes dramatically. So the protein content and the milk actually doubles at that time. So it really helps support the bear cub's growth. All right, next animal. Check this one out. Any clues of what it could be? To me, it looks like it's in water. You can kind of see, maybe that could be a tail, the gray shape. You guessed a whale. You were right. It is actually a blue whale and her calf. So the interesting thing about blue whales is that they are, one, the largest mammal on this earth that we know of. And also their mammary glands are the largest mammary glands. They actually weigh the same amount of weight as a baby elephant. So the cool thing is you have to think about like milk and water. How does a baby calf drink milk in the water? Well, it does this because the milk is 50% milk fat. 50%. So think about it. The milk that you get in the grocery store from cows is usually 1 to 3%. That's a very, very small amount of milk fat. So 50% is pretty crazy. And that helps the whales gain a ton of weight really quickly so they can swim in really deep, cold waters. But also it makes so that the milk actually forms these big bubbles. And so they can slurp up the milk in these big milk bubbles in the water. Okay, what about this one? What do you see? What's interesting? For me, I see a pattern. Is it a pattern that you've probably seen before on an animal? Guessed a cow, you were right. It's actually a Holstein cow. Holstein cows are very, very efficient milkers. So the cool thing about cows is they can make 6 to 7 gallons of milk a day. That's about 96 to 110 glasses of milk a day. That's a lot. That's a lot of milk. The other cool things is that dairy cows are really efficient milkers. They can be milked about 300 days out of the year, which is really cool. This one may be a tricky one. Also one of my favorite animals. Did you guess a mouse? Maybe. The little nose kind of gave away for me. So mice are also very efficient milkers. I actually studied mouse milk in grad school. So I milked mice, probably one of 5 people in the world that says they milked a mouse. So that's what I did for my animal science degree. And I really studied mice for a lot of different reasons, but one reason is that they're really efficient milkers. So think of them as like tiny little dairy cows. But the cool thing is they lactate for 2 weeks. So within that 2 weeks span when they are making milk for their babies, they are making really, really dense milk. So the cool thing is within that 2-week time frame, the amount of milk fat that they produce is the same as their body weight. So it's about 32 grams, which doesn't sound like a lot, but it's a lot for a mouse. They make 32 grams of milk fat in a 2-week time period. So that is really fascinating. Oh, this is a good one. Guess this animal. I don't know if you noticed, but since we're talking about milk, all of these animals are mammals. That is one of the characteristics of a mammal, is that they make milk to support their offspring's growth. So this may be a bit tricky. Did anybody guess a platypus? Aren't they like adorable when they're little? Oh my gosh. So yes, so platypus are egg-laying mammals, which is really interesting. They're also really fascinating. So they do make milk, but they do not have teats on their stomach. So think of teats like the udder of a cow. So they don't have teats. So that means the milk just kind of comes out of their skin pores on their belly. But it kind of makes sense if you think about that platypus have a bill. So it'd be really hard for them to latch on like a teat, like an udder on a cow. Well, one of the really cool things about platypus is that scientists are actually really interested in them. We have found 10 years ago, a bunch of animal scientists, I guess, who were out milking platypus, they found that platypus milk has a natural protein in it that's actually antibacterial. So they've been really studying that a lot to see what that kind of protein would do, especially when you have antibiotic strains of bacteria and stuff like that. So that's kind of one of the cool things that animal sciences are looking into. So milk's important. Okay, what about this one? Looks like a tail. Looks kind of furry. Did you guess a kangaroo? If not, that was a pretty hard picture. I was trying to get a tricky one. So kangaroos are really fascinating because they make 2 different kinds of milk at the same time. So the gestation period of a kangaroo is really short. It's 33 days. And a gestation period means the pregnancy period. So if you think 33 days to be for a full pregnancy is a really short amount of time. So when a baby kangaroo or a joey is born, they're about the size of a jelly bean. They're really small, they're not very fully developed, so they actually stay inside the kangaroo's pouch for a really long time. But with kangaroos, they usually have 2 children at the same time. So they'll have a very small, developing, growing baby joey in their pouch. But usually they also have an older joey that's out and exploring. He doesn't really live in the pouch. He's just hanging out, checking out the world, learning everything. So he's out and about. So the cool thing is that they make two different kinds of milk, one to support the older joeys and also the one that's really growing. So the one that's growing gets a ton of milk sugar. So you guys may have heard of lactose. So they make a lot of lactose in that milk to really support the growing one. And the other joey, they have a lot more of the protein in the milk. So I think that's really fascinating. All right. So I'll just give you a moment. I talked about a lot of different animals. What is your favorite animal? What would be one really cool thing about them? While you think about this, I will set up these activities. So I'm going to spin you around a little bit. So hold on. Just kidding. It's not like a roller coaster or anything. Get some good light. For me, if you're asking me what my favorite animal is, it's dogs. I love dogs. I love wolves. I love cats. Those are my favorite animals. I have a big Bernese Mountain Dog and he's not big, but he is mighty and personality cat. And they're both like circumventing me. So if they pop up in the screen, you could say hi. The dog's name's Bo. The cat's name is Pippin. Awesome. So I will stop sharing so I can show you some more of these activities. So milk. Milk is fascinating. Milk's a very complex fluid, which is really cool. I love milk for a lot of different reasons. I love all the different dairy products. You know what? I should probably get my milk out. Oh, there's nothing better than a nice ice cold glass of milk. Awesome. So I mentioned earlier that milk is complex fluid. It has sugars, proteins, fats, vitamins, and minerals. So today, the first thing that we're going to do is we're actually going to see milk fat. So I just got out of my big old jug of milk. So it's really nice and cold. I'm going to pour some milk into a little container right here. Oh, this is 1% milk fat. I'm usually like a whole milk person. The person I live with, my husband, he likes more like a 1%. So everyone has their own preferences, right? So I've made a compromise. Sometimes we get 1%, sometimes we get whole milk. Today, we'll see what these experiments look like with 1% milk. So I poured this milk into this little tiny glass container. So I just got it out of the fridge and I'll put it in view so you can see it. I went the wrong way. Okay, awesome. My favorite colors are blue. I like red too. So I'm going to put in some couple drops of food coloring. This will really help us see the milk fat inside the milk. This works really well if you wanted to ever try this at home when the milk is really cold. You can put a couple drops in. So maybe the coloring is the size of maybe a nickel. That really helps to do it. And then you can add multiple different drops of food coloring. Just try not to get the colors too close together so you can separate them out. So you can really see the cool effects of when we get to see the milk fat. So milk is a really interesting fluid. It's actually a colloid fluid. So that means that there are things inside of a solution. Whoa, I just put in a lot of green. Ooh, that's gonna look cool. So colloid means that there's something in a solution that's not soluble in water, so it doesn't dissolve, if you think about that. So milk is a good example of this type of really cool fluid because milk fat does not dissolve in milk. It's kind of just equally dispersed, but it's in there, right? And if you want to think about milk fat in water, think back to that animal, the blue whales that I said earlier, that's 50% milk fat, and it kind of creates like a big milk bubble, and that's how the babies drink milk. So that's one of the really cool aspects of milk, and that's why it's really interesting in our natural animal world. Okay. Now I'm just getting too artsy with this. I think it's enough colors. Okay. So I got a bunch of colors. You can see it's the blue and the green. I went a little crazy with the green. So it looks kind of like green milk. So this is science. Once you do science experiments, you really don't eat or drink stuff. So now the other cool piece is I'm going to get a little bit of dish soap. This thing is actually, you just need a little bit. I don't have any toothpicks at home, but I use these things to eat corn on the cob. So science is cool when you can get a little bit experimental and just use things that you have in your kitchen. So I'm gonna put a little bit of dish soap, just detergent, on the tip of this, and then we will see what happens. So I mentioned milk and water. So when you put a little bit of soap, and you put in the milk, the first thing you see, you can probably see that the green kind of moved around. I broke the surface tension of the milk. So I wasn't really touching it. I was being really careful not to move it around so it wasn't being shook a little bit. So once I poked it a little bit and broke the surface tension, you can see that the milk is starting to mix together. So remember I said that milk fats doesn't really like to dissolve in, or doesn't dissolve in water. It's very hydrophobic. It doesn't like water at all. So all of the colors move to the sides of the container. So that's kind of what happened to the milk fat. So the milk fat was really attached to the food coloring. So I told you that we were trying this out to see if we can visualize milk fat. So think about this food coloring, what's going on. That's actually what's going on with the fat. It's kind of like, ooh, like running to the sides. It doesn't like the soap, doesn't like the water. And the cool thing is, when you poke it a little bit more with some soap bubbles, you can kind of see that the color is like moving around a little bit. It almost looks like it's boiling. Like if you see like bubbles moving, it's not boiling, but what's happening is that the milk fat is starting to kind of move around because it wants to get away from the soap and it wants to get away from the water a little bit. This is something that's pretty cool to watch. So all you need to do to try this at home is just get a container of milk. I like to use a glass container so you can really see stuff. And you can just use food coloring to visualize it, and just a drop of soap, and just see what happens, which is really cool. So it's moving a little bit. I've done this before and it's moved more. If you think I've done it before, do you have any clues or any ideas of why maybe the coloring's not moving as much? Maybe giving you a hint earlier. There's Bo. Hi, Bo. Good job. You want to watch? Okay, so Bo's watching. So I mentioned earlier that this is 1% milk. So that's probably why it's not moving as much as when I've done this before. So if you ever use, I've used whole milk before, and the colors are really moving around. So that could be a really cool experiment if you want to try it at home. If you have family members like me that we enjoy different kinds of milk, like whole milk versus 1%, and see the difference. That would be a really cool experiment to try. So science, huh? Always thinking about different things. So this was one way to visualize milk fat. That's one of the things though that I told you about that's in milk. Let's talk about milk proteins. So the milk proteins are really cool. There's a bunch of different kinds of proteins. The one that we may have heard of before are actually called caseins. So it's a special kind of protein. It's only found in milk. And 80% of the milk proteins, especially in cow's milk, is actually casein. So I have a container. This is glass, so you can microwave it. So you can pour milk into a container. And I'm going to show you this experiment. You can do it at home if you want to visualize milk proteins and see what they look like. So let's do this and see. So I'm going to pour a cup of milk. You can also try this out with powdered milk. You just have to reconstitute it with water, meaning just mix it up with water. So I poured a cup of milk and I'm gonna stick this in the microwave for 1.5 minutes. I want it hot, but not boiling. You can also do this on a stovetop. So same thing, just let it get pretty warm, but not to the point where it's boiling. Stick this in here. So while this is heating up, let's talk about proteins a little bit more. So the cool thing about proteins, especially the proteins that are in our body and the proteins that we eat, are in a very structured and folded formation. That's really important for our bodies. So the structure and the way that proteins are folded, it's really important. And milk casings are definitely one of those proteins where they have a very interesting way that they're folded. And I will show you and tell you why the formation of proteins is really key. Bo is just like, something's happening. Look at him. And he's like, I don't know what it is, but I'm here for it. He just doesn't know what to do. Oh. Funny thing is, some animals can be lactose intolerant. I definitely know Bo cannot have dairy products. We did a food trial when he was a puppy. We found out he had a lot of allergies. Yeah, sadly, Bo can't have cheese, which he really loves. It's a really great training treat. So he's the one person in our household who can't have cheese. He sees the word. If you say the word, he gets really upset. Other things that are pretty interesting, speaking of food allergies and talking about proteins. So people used to think that they were lactose intolerant, but a lot of research is coming out now that people are actually intolerant to a specific kind of protein in milk. So I don't know if you guys have heard commercials of A2 milk. So that's a really interesting thing. It's actually talking about alpha casein, which is the big primary casein in cow's milk. So people are starting to find out through research and from doing food trials with themselves and eating something for a while and then not eating it and see how they feel when they reintroduce it in their diet. They're starting to pinpoint that they actually have a hard time digesting one kind of milk protein. So the cool thing is with science, and this is just like a brand new thing within the last like 5 years or so, animal scientists have found that they can get a herd of cows that only make a different kind of protein called alpha casein 2. So not the big alpha casein 1, but the second one. And if they milk cows that only make that special kind of protein, then people that may have a food allergy can drink milk without feeling upset, which I think is pretty cool. So I can kind of touch it. It's not too hot. I don't know if y'all heard. It was kind of beeping while I was talking because y'all, when I start talking about milk, I lose track of time. Just kidding. No, not really. It's true. Okay, so now I'm gonna add 4 tablespoons of vinegar. So I have just white vinegar here that I'm gonna pour in. Ooh, if I can pour it right. So I'm gonna pour it in. Ooh, the vinegar has a strong smell. So we're gonna add, that's 2. Ooh, that's 3. Oh, now this is cool. Stuff's already happening. Let me see if I can bring it closer so you can see. So we talked about milk. We said milk is a really complex fluid, and I told you that we're going to visualize the milk protein. So I added vinegar to this milk. It was hot, but it wasn't boiling. And immediately you could see it starting to separate. Looks kind of weird. I think science is cool. So you can see it's like turning into a solid. So I'm gonna stir this up a little bit more and get a really nice big clump of a solid. So what you're actually visualizing is the vinegar, which is an acid, is separating out the milk proteins from the rest of the milk. So this is all milk proteins, and specifically the caseins in this big solid form. And the rest of this stuff is the rest of milk, but it's also called whey. I don't know if y'all have ever heard of whey, and whey is kind of the rest. It's just a nice umbrella term, but whey has actually got a little bit of the protein. So I said earlier that 80% of cow milk proteins is caseins. Well, the other 20% is in this remaining liquid called whey. So, all right, I got a nice big clump. I'm going to grab another one of these things, and I have 2 coffee filters. So I'm going to place the coffee filters inside of this container. And I want to strain out as much of that remaining liquid as I can. I'm going to transfer this nice big solid thing that we just made to this other container with the coffee filter. And get some of this extra liquid, or what it really is whey. And it's just a little bit warm, so I can kind of squeeze out some of the remaining liquid. If you do this at home, make sure you do it in a place that you can clean up. So I'm in my kitchen. It's an easy place to clean. Also, since we're heating up things and using things in the kitchen, one, ask permission. It's always a nice thing to do, and it's kind of others. And if you're using the microwave or stove, get your favorite adult to help you. It's also fun to do it with others. I wish y'all were here and we were doing this in person, but this is the next best thing. All right, so I got a lot of this liquid out by squeezing some of it in, and I have a stack of paper towels. I just grabbed 4. So I really want to try to get some of this extra liquid out. I feel like I'm on like a cooking show. It's kind of cool. All right, and so now in this paper towel, I'm going to just kind of pat it, try to get all that extra liquid out. So look at this thing. It's kind of cool. Look what I made. So these are actually just casings. So I'll give you a second to think about this, but does this remind you of something? What I just showed you, big white blob. Does it remind you of a dairy product? To me, it's kind of like cottage cheese. So actually adding an acid, we added vinegar. What we did is a process called curdling. And curdling means it's when you're separating out the milk proteins or the solids from the rest of the parts of milk, which is a process pretty similar to making cottage cheese. Look at this. I actually got a lot. So I'm gonna do a little bit more patting just to get it really nice and dry. The cool thing is, I always try it with different kinds of milk. I've done it with powdered milk. This is actually the first time I've tried it out with 1%. It worked really well visualizing the milk proteins. It worked okay doing the food coloring and visualizing the milk fat, maybe because it doesn't have as much milk fat compared to whole milk. This is cool. So the neat thing is, once you kind of have it nice and dry, you can kind of form different shapes if you want. I've used cookie cutters before, or I poked a hole in it with a pencil once to kind of make a pendant. But if you let it sit out to dry for about 48 hours, 72 hours, and I usually just let it sit on a paper towels, it will dry really hard. This is one I did last week. See, I try to make a little, what do YouTubers do? How do we do this? Look at this. I tried to poke a hole in it. I wanted to make like a pendant. It worked okay. That was my first try doing it. Look at this. Look at me. Look at me being a YouTuber. Okay. And the cool thing is once it dries, you can color with it, or you can color on it with Sharpies. I've also used just markers, and it's kind of cool. And then it's like this forever. So it's pretty neat that it dries like this. People on the internet sometimes like to say that this is plastic, and it's not plastic. It's actually what plastic was modeled to be like. So back in the 1800s, people used to do this process to make belt buckles and jewelry. So way before we knew about plastic and used plastic, this is like the precursor to plastic because it does dry and it's kind of like that forever, which is really cool. I had another pendant that I made that was really amazing, but my cat got a hold of it and played with it, and now it's probably underneath a couch somewhere, and I'll find it years later, which will be a fun surprise, I guess. And it'll probably be the exact same thing, but this is a pendant I made last week, and maybe I'll color it, do something fun with it. Who knows? So it's pretty cool. We just got to visualize milk proteins and milk fat, which is pretty amazing. The other thing that I should also mention, because we're talking about science, scientists always clean up after themselves. So I did kind of make a bit of a mess. So make sure you definitely clean up after yourself after this, because like I said, it does dry and it's kind of like that forever. So the spoon I use before it dries, I need to clean it up or it'll forever be that way. So if you're in a hurry, you can definitely use maybe a plastic spoon or plastic cups, but today I just used what I found in my kitchen. But all scientists have to do dishes. I know I did when I worked in a lab all the time. Something they may not tell you in school. You gotta do dishes in the lab too. Awesome. Well, those were the 2 experiments that I wanted to show you. I hope you learned something new. I hope you thought about milk differently. I hope this gives you some space to think about how you enjoy milk in your own life. Do you incorporate it every day? Is it something that you enjoy for like special occasions? Also too, it's interesting to think about milk in different cultures in other parts of the world. Milk is used in a lot of different ways. Oh, that's a really cool question about goat's milk versus cow's milk. The activities would work, but they probably would not work the same. So like I mentioned in the earlier activities when we were guessing the animals, as you can see, a lot of different animals make milk, but the protein and the fat percentages are very different. It's very tailored to how you support their offspring growth, like comparing a blue whale to a mouse, very different. So even though you think goats and cows are pretty much the same, their milk is a little bit different. So they have a little bit more protein content in their milk. So that would be a really interesting experiment to do goat's milk versus cow's milk. You can just think about it like goat cheese versus cow cheese is very different in like texture and taste, which I think is really fascinating. And I know we touched on a little bit about the curdling process, but the cheese making process is just another fascinating world that we could talk about for another hour. It's really interesting how the different variables that you add, like aging or the enzymes that you add, can lead to 33,000 different kinds of cheese. It's just amazing. And it really all comes back to, you can get all these different varieties of products because milk is such a complex fluid. So if anybody does do that experiment with goat milk, I'm here for it. Let me know how it works out. I would love to know. If you guys can study any kind of animal, what would it be? I mentioned earlier, I love wolves. I would study wolf behavior. I think wolves are fascinating. Oh yeah, no bugs. No bugs for me and no snakes for me. No, I really try. Oh, no frogs, no toads. I don't know if you can sense a pattern. I like mammals. Reptiles, never really truly been my thing. But yeah, no bugs. I'm sure they're cool in their own right, but not with milk. Has to be a mammal. Awesome. Well, study about mouse milk. Oh, it's a really good question. Yeah, I never thought I would study mouse milk. It kind of happened. But the cool thing is with mice is you can have transgenic mice. So I was really interested in two specific genes that were related to human breast cancer. So I used them as a model for human breast cancer. But I was really interested to know what these genes did normally. So sometimes that's what scientists do as a strategy. If something that you found, like let's talk about breast cancer, that's a bad situation. So scientists sometimes that want to study what happens when a bad situation happens, sometimes you have to think about it in a different context, like, well, what does it do normally? So that's what I was studying about these two genes, like what do these two genes do normally in a mammary gland when an animal is making milk? So that was a really cool experiment on a lot of different angles. We learned a lot, and I think a lot of it still has a lot of applications today for the dairy industry, since a lot of science is being used on dairy cows. So we found that the genes I was really studying with mice are really needed to make milk. And if they don't have a lot of those genes involved, it's really hard to make milk in the big format that it needs to go to get outside the gland. So we talked about milk's very complex. So if you think about a cell, it has to make the proteins, the fats, the sugars, and put it all together. And these genes were kind of in part of putting it all together so it can be secreted out. So that's what I did. And I had to milk mice for it, which is pretty cool. Awesome. Well, I appreciate your time. This was great. I hope you learned something. And maybe you can try this out at home. See how it goes. All right. Thank you so much.